Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's T-Levels Construction Onsite and BSE webinar. We are going to get going quite sharpish because it is 12:30 now, and I know we've still got attendees registering and getting logged on. But we will get through the formalities of the webinar and get it underway now anyway. So just by way of some introductions, and we've got colleagues on from DFE who will introduce shortly as well. My name is Jason Howe. I'm a technical advisor at City and Guilds for construction. And on the call today, we're joined by Rob Mallender, my colleague, who's for technical advisor for BSE, colleague Michael Scarrett from EAL, who's a product specialist. And we're also joined by Sam Nevin, who is from the DFE, who's going to talk a little bit later about industry placements and just give some more guidance on those. Apologies if this is very familiar to you anyway, but just some formalities when we're running through T-levels and what they are. So T-levels sit obviously within three department and government initiatives alongside A-levels and apprenticeships. And as we know, T-levels is a 2-year program with 80% classroom based and 20% in an industrial placement, where learners can build on their skills and their attitudes and attributes towards successful completion of a T-level. Then obviously once learners complete their T-levels, there's 4 routes in which they can go into. So higher education, skilled employment, which we know is unlikely for construction on site, more so progression into an apprenticeship, possible progression as well into higher and degree apprenticeships as well. So a lot of opportunities open up for learners completing T-levels. So as just mentioned, how do T-levels differ from apprenticeships? We know that apprenticeships are 80% on the job and 20% off the job, and the T-level is basically the vice versa of that. So the T-level is 80% in college and 20% in the workplace. So there's a lot of broad content in the T-level as well, mainly around the core components, that introduction of some new topics and some wider criteria that's relevant for the construction industry. And that's obviously complemented with the occupational specialism as well, which looks at the trades or the OSs in a bit more detail and looking at more complexities around those as well. So where are T-levels at currently? So this is just a quick overview of the T-levels that's available, and the T-levels that's been awarded and when they're planned for delivery, and which awarding organisations are going to be launching those and rolling those out on behalf of DFE and the Institute. So for construction on site, obviously the design, surveying and planning, colleagues from Pearson's have rolled that out last September in the middle of the pandemic. And, we've worked closely with Pearson's to gain feedback on how that's gone, and we'll attend events with those. And as what we're here for today, construction on site and BSE, obviously City and Guilds and EAL have been working on the TQ development of that and the assessments, and we successfully launched that September just gone. Moving forward, just some other areas that may be of interest to you, such as business admin, animal environmental care, agriculture or engineering. Again, City and Guilds in partnership with EAL was successful in the engineering sector, and City and Guilds individually for the business admin and the agriculture, environmental and animal care as well. So those T-levels are well under development now, and will be coming very, very soon. So just looking at the T-level in a little bit more detail with regards to the programme, the T-level is going to be approximately 1,800 hours over the 2 years, depending on the occupational specialism and the core that you're doing. So we know that for construction on site and BSE, those may differ. Then you've got, within that, you've got the core component, and that is assessed through an external, 2 external exams and an employee set project, which we'll come on to shortly. You'll see that. And the occupational specialism, which is the trades, in layman terms, so carpentry, joinery, brick, plaster, paint, plumbing and heating, electrical, electronic, gas, etc. Then you've got your industry placement, which is a bit more significant than what we've been used to through study programme work placements, 315 hours or 45 days. And those industry placements should be seen as a positive to open opportunity for learners to demonstrate what the skills they've been learning whilst on the T-level programme, and getting them work ready for ideally apprenticeships moving forward. Then you've got the other requirements. So these could be anything such as license to practice or professional qualifications, or things like CSCS tests that learners may have to undertake in order that to get on site, or things that are specific to those TQ qualifications, such as the core and the OS. Then you've got, as general, your employability, enrichment, and pastoral requirements of a general program anyway. So looking at the T-level program, you've got the core, you've got the occupational specialism, which we've mentioned, and that's going to take up approximately 80% of the program time, alongside maths, English, and your other requirements as well. And then you've got your industry placement, which, as shown on screen, where learners will be able to demonstrate the technical skills and knowledge you've been learning whilst doing the T-level, enhance and develop practical skills, and also have some meaningful contribution to the workplace. And that could be anything, because as we know, for the construction industry, the work placements will differ vastly, dependent on the location of the employer, the types of work they're going to be undertaking. So, learners making a contribution and experiencing that is going to be vital for their progression beyond the T-level. So just looking at construction and BSE, what we are going to show you first is a screenshot. So this is every T-level page on the City and Guilds website has that screenshot to the side there. And I would ask and advise that you share this with all of your colleagues who are involved in the delivery of T-level, so that they receive all of the updates and the information regarding the events that we put on, the webinars, because we've just been discussing, actually, we are now back on the road and we're delivering face-to-face events. Myself and colleagues have events planned in the new year where we're on the road visiting centres and delivering sessions on T-levels. And this is a perfect way of getting to know what's happening and what events and stuff we've got going on. So please do share this link with colleagues that may be working on T-levels. Just to showcase some of the employers that have supported this, the development of the TQ and the assessments. So when we're looking at the range of employers that we've engaged with this, we've looked at big national house builders, but then looked at some specific industry bodies who have access to a wide variety of employees and have such a large membership base, such as the Paint and Decorating Association. And through that process, we've engaged with one-man bands, as well as, like I've mentioned, the big national house builders or the big contractors that operate in the sector. So such a wide range, and this is a small screenshot of just a small selection of the employees that's been a part of that process. So looking at construction on site, as mentioned, you begin with the core, and that is delivered over the first year, for example, which then leads into the 2 assessments, which is 2 externally set and marked exams and 1 employer set project. The construction on site core and the BSE core have a lot of similar content in there, with the BSE has some slightly amplified content, so their core is slightly bigger, which I'll come on to. Then you've got the occupational specialism. These will run in conjunction with the core as well. So, for example, in year 1, you'll probably have a longer, thinner model of occupational specialism delivery, which will then obviously increase in year 2, because within year 1, you're also delivering the core. Your occupational specialisms are assessed and externally marked and moderated through a practical synoptical assignment, which is done within your centre. And those are the 4 OSs current for construction on site. So looking at BSE, as mentioned, the BSE core, it's assessed in exactly the same way as the construction core, where it's 2 externally set exams and an employer set project, but the BSE core is slightly larger than the construction on site core, as there are some extra components in there for the learners to complete. Then this is where BSE differs again. You have 4 standalone occupational specialisms in Group A, which is the electric and technical engineering, the electronic and electrical equipment engineering, protection systems, and gas. For Group B, which is probably going to be the most popular, you're going to have plumbing and heating engineering and ventilation, refridge, and air conditioning. And those occupational specialisms must be delivered as a combined OS. And those are assessed again by the synoptic assignment. So for those where you've got combined OSs, you'll be planning in for 2 assessments for each occupational specialism respectively. Just some information. Obviously, as the TQ has been launched, we launched it in September, and with that comes the City and Guilds POS numbers. So for construction on site, the lead POS number on that is 8711-30, and for BSE it's 8710-30. So when you're registering your learners, that is what the main qualification name is attached to, is that POS number. So when you're registering learners, you must register them on that core component first, and then the occupational specialism component straight after, essentially. Then you have your occupational specialism POS numbers for city and guilds, and for construction, obviously they're on screen, and BSE respectively as well. And then POS numbers relate to the OS. So this is just a bit of information for you when you start navigating the website and start looking at the qualification handbook, just to try and get you familiar with how things have progressed with that. So I'm just going to introduce Sam, who's a colleague from DFE, who's going to talk you through the next part of industry placements.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so we've got some slides to share. So as just mentioned, my name's Sam Nevin. I work in the industry placements team in the Department for Education. It does say Sam Nevin and Christopher Hooper, but Chris isn't able to join us today, so it's just myself. So if we just move on to the next slide. So basically, we're just going to have a bit of a recap on what industry placements are. I think obviously we've just sort of talked through the main components of T-levels anyway. So again, some of this might be not very new to you, or it might be stuff that you actually hearing for the first time. But essentially, for an industry placement, it is the time spent by a 16 to 19-year-old student learning and working in an organisation. And this we will want it to take place in a real environment. So this is with an employer making a meaningful contribution to the organisation. And this really just gives the student the opportunity to develop skills in the classroom, which they can put into practice. And sort of it's in this again in a real life working environment. We're looking at a minimum of 315 hours, which approximately works out at 45 days. Average is sort of aiming at 350 hours. And this sort of ramp up in hours is basically the key to the heart of the industry placement. We're wanting the industry placement to be occupationally specific as well. This enables the development of students' practical and technical skills. And we are also now allowing placements in a single block, day release, or a mix of the two. If we go to the next slide, please. So what an industry placement should offer, here we're kind of just wanting to re-emphasize the point that we've been making. There's often questions about industry placements, and this sort of essentially gives a guide to thinking, well, does it do these things? So a high quality industry placement should give a student a chance to put into practice level 3 technical skills that they have learned as part of their T-level, where they can develop and hone the knowledge and skills that they need to progress. It also gives the students credibility with prospective employers, improves the students' confidence, competence and employability, and as well as this gives the employer the opportunity to develop and shape young people's skills to build their future workforce, which is one of the sort of key messages that we're trying to get out across to employers. And this set out to meet the employer's needs as well as seeing what the young person is capable of before potentially taking them on as an apprentice or as an employee. And finally, it gives an opportunity for the provider to ensure that the course equips students with the skills employers are looking for and ensures that they're ready for the working world. Next slide, please. So this is sort of covering the existing models and approaches that we have in place for industry placements. We obviously want to make sure that industry placements are of high quality, but we're also recognizing that one size doesn't fit all, and it doesn't fit all industries. And that's why we've sort of introduced these different models and approaches for a bit of flexibility. So the allowable models and approaches are outlined in Annex A of the Industry Placements Delivery Guidance, and I believe we've got a link to that on the final slide. But the existing models that we've got in place, so we've got part-time work, which can count towards the industry placement hours if the job is occupationally relevant. We've allowed multiple employers, so a placement can be split across a maximum of 2 employers now. We've also introduced work taster activities, so up to a maximum of 35 hours of work taster activities can be counted towards students' total number of placement hours and can be delivered virtually. And I think this is quite a useful opportunity to see whether it's actually a good fit for the student and the employer. It gives the employer the opportunity to see whether the student would fit in with sort of the work ethos and would be capable of doing the work that you would be offering. We've introduced route level placements. So for digital and then engineering and manufacturing placements, these can be undertaken at route level as opposed to those only relevant to their occupational specialism. We've also introduced the use of skills hubs or employee training centres, where students studying for a construction or engineering and manufacturing T-level can begin their placement within an established skills hub or employers training centre, and this is for a maximum of 105 hours. As well as this, we've got commercial, charitable or community projects. Again, for students studying construction T-levels, they can work in small teams alongside an external construction employer or industry professional, again for the 105 hours, to plan and implement a project that develops students' construction skills. We've also got that one lead employer facilitated placement through its supply chain. And again, this relates to construction and also engineering and manufacturing T-levels only. And then for students with SEND, they can undertake 105 hours of the placement on the provider's on-site facilities. It is worth also noting, it's not on the slide at the minute, but we have included some exemptions. So, for example, providers can apply special consideration and mark placement. Providers can apply special consideration and mark a placement completed where the students experience adverse circumstances but has demonstrated sufficient progress towards learning goals. There are students who are unable to complete industry placement hours in the 2-year programme also have until the 10th of October the following year to be awarded a certificate. If we move to the next slide. Yes, so this basically covers what support we have in place for providers and employers. So a lot of this, over the last couple of years, sort of gearing up for rollout of T-levels, we've tried to put in as much support as possible for providers and for employers to ensure that industry placements are delivered to extremely high quality, and both providers and employers feel comfortable in offering industry placements and delivering them. So we've provided over £200 million in capacity and delivery funding to providers, and this has helped them establish the infrastructure and resources needed to deliver industry placements, and this has been ongoing since 2018. We've got industry placements delivery guidance for providers and employers published, and there is also a streamlined version for employers and a student guide to help them prepare. We've also published the Industry Placement Employer Guide, which is a short version of the delivery guidance, and this is written specifically for employers to help deliver in high quality industry placements. We have in place a couple of different support packages, the first of which is the provider support package, which is aimed at supporting 2020, 2021 and 2022 providers to help them deliver industry placements in line with the delivery guidance. The other support package, which is called a couple of bullet points down, is the employer support package, which has been delivered. And this is a package of support comprised of online guidance, case studies and workshops. This has been delivered by the Strategic Development Network, and this is to help employers to host high quality placements by essentially getting guidance and any sort of there is also one-to-one support involved in this as well. So if employers are struggling, they can contact the Strategic Development Network for this. We have in place the Employer Engagement and Apprenticeships Performance Service, or EEAP for short. They're formerly known as NAS, so the National Apprenticeship Service, and they're providing a referral and matching service to make it easier for employers to be put in touch with local providers. And so far, NAS have engaged with over 16,000 employers. We also have in place the civil service and public sector work, so we're coordinating the delivery of industry placements across the civil service and working with public sector organisations such as local LGAs and NHS trusts to support industry placements provision, and we're also raising awareness of and increasing the number of placements delivered via government suppliers. And then finally, you may or may not have seen about this, but we have in place at the minute an employer incentive fund, which is a short-term £10 million fund in response to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is just to basically trying to incentivise employers to host industry placements for Wave 1 and 2 T-level students. So employers can claim up to £1,000 per student with a maximum of 10 students per region. So there is obviously some incentive-based payments in at the minute as well. And then if we go to, I think it's the final slide. So this is basically, I mean, obviously, I assume you could have these slide packs sent out to yourselves if you need to take note of the resources, but the resources we've got in place, so we have the NAS helpline, which you can see as well as the links to the industry placements policy statement and the guidance and resources. We also have some useful case study videos that we've published on YouTube, which give you an idea of how industry placements have been ran so far, and sort of how employers have worked with that, and what the benefits have been to students as well. And again, delivery guidance and the T-Levels employer support website. And then if you've got any sort of questions, we have attached our industry placements email address to the bottom of this. It's industry.placements@education.gov.uk. It normally tends to be myself or one of my colleagues who picks up any emails they send in. So if there's anything you need, obviously you're more than welcome to get in touch. And we've also included the wider provider support found at support.tlevels.gov.uk. And that's about it from us, I think.
Thanks a lot, Sam. Yeah, just to reinforce what Sam's saying, there's some really good resources on those websites. We have been working with the Wave 1 providers to look through some of that. We are constantly dropping things in the chat as part of the presentation. So if you want to go to the chat function, you might be able to pick up some of these useful links as well as just a heads up before we kick on to the next slide, just to say, you know, any questions, feel free to drop them in the questions tab and we'll pick them up at the end. Okay, so I think if we look at the next slide, we're now going to look at some of the support and resources we've got available from City and Guilds. So I'm Rob Ballard, one of the technical advisors. I'm just going to take you through some of the actual material and how to find it, etc. So we'll try and drop a link in the chat there to the qualification code 8711, which is the construction on-site qualification number. So if you want to go to the City and Guilds search function, drop 8711 in the top bar there, and it should take you to where this link will take you, which is the qualification page. And as you can see on there, you've got all the sample assessment materials, as well as the qualification handbook with some very useful information around the content of that core delivery Jason talked about earlier, obviously, and all the information around the occupational specialisms you required, and, you know, obviously what's included with regards the requirements to teach each one of those specialisms. There's also, you know, all your test specs in there, all the outline of assessment principles. So it is a useful document, and I think if anybody is preparing for T-Levels for the coming academic year, that will be the starting point to download that and have a look through some of the useful information in the Qual Handbook. So that's the one for construction. Just looking at some of those core components for the on-site construction. As you'll see in there, there is a lot of new information we wouldn't generally relate to maybe some of the trade qualifications we deliver at the moment, some of the overlying construction design principles, construction and built environment sustainability, probably taken to a little bit further than we'd normally take in current delivery of qualifications, let's say. So this is probably the big new thing with regards to T-level and construction on site. The actual trade element, you know, the occupational specialism element, if you like, is probably what most centres are used to delivering at the moment. You know, it's the brickwork, it's the carpentry, etc. for the on-site construction, and what most centres know and love, whereas this is probably some of the content we've not delivered before, perhaps, and potentially why we've got a lot of resources around this element, the construction on-site core component, as well as the building services one. So as you can see, for construction on-site, there's 11 learning outcomes there. These learning outcomes are actually in the building services one as well as 3 extra ones, which we'll run through how they relate on future slides. So if we just move on to the next slide, I'm not going to go into this into any much detail because it's just literally the same link, just a different qualification page. For BSE, the qual code number is 8710. And as you can see, we've got the drop down box there with assessment materials, and you've got all your sample assessment materials on there, as well as the qualification handbook, the course handbook, which is again the outline of what's required to teach for each specialism, as well as the core. So if we look at the structure for the core for building services on the next slide, we can see how that relates to the construction on site. So I mentioned earlier on the previous slide, the first 11 underpinning knowledge outcomes in the core are actually the same core principles and core knowledge outcomes. But just a little bit of a heads up on that, they have been actually amplified differently. So what that means is when they've been turned into a qualification, although the actual core content is the same, so the underpinning core content we was given to develop the qualification was same across building services and construction on site. For the on site, we've had construction consultants amplify that content and turn it into a qualification. And for building services, we've had building services consultants do the same process. So as you can see, the actual outcome of that, the actual qualification content isn't necessarily identical, although will be closely related for those first 11 learning outcomes. And then you've got 12 to 14 for BSE, which are standalone and only in building services, which are the building services, engineering systems, maintenance principles, and the specialist one about tools, equipment, and materials for building services systems. So, you know, it's been a common question along the journey we've been taking with this year's centres. You know, can we mix some of the delivery? Can we merge some of the delivery together with the on-site and the BSE? Maybe we've got low numbers. Potentially some centres are looking into that, but just being mindful of the fact that they have been amplified differently, and we have got to give it that building services slant and follow the course handbook, really. That's the differences. The course handbook and how it's structured is different for both qualifications, and the assessments are different. They'll have been written by the specialist consultant in that area, whether it be building services or construction on site. So although we've got a lot of the principles are the same, let's say, there is a different slant across building services on site for those first 11 outcomes. So let's move to the next slide, and we can see how the handbook is actually structured. So when I said things have been amplified differently, we may have the same criteria. So we know and love the structure of some of this, you know, the learning outcome we're used to in current handbooks, criteria, assessment criteria. We're sort of familiar with that context and how that's structured in the qualification handbook, as well as the range you've got below that, where you've got all your legislation and regulations listed. And as before, you know, if the range for delivery, if there's something not in the range, then it shouldn't be assessed. So any legislation outside that range shouldn't be in any assessment in any shape or form. But then we've got this new amplification, what do learners need to learn section, which gives you a bit more of an overview of what things should be taught, maybe the scope of the delivery, how much detail have we got to go in for the certain topics, etc. So that's probably new, and we've not seen that in any well, it's not probably new, it is new for building services and construction. We've not seen that in any of our qualification handbooks before, and that could then form part of any scheme of work, lesson plan, etc., to help you structure delivery and make sure you're covering the criteria, the range, etc., to the relevant depth of delivery. So that's an element of support in effect. You know, it should give you a bit more of an overview of what to teach and to what detail. So that's just to go through the structure of the handbook. We've also got just there on the right hand side, before we close this slide off, how things relate to the core skills and general competencies in English and mathematics and digital skills. The overview of how that's mapped is also in the front of the qualification handbook as well, if required. So that's how things are structured with regards to the handbook. We'll now have a look at how things are assessed. So similar models of assessment for construction on site and building services. So for the core component, we've got exam paper 1 and exam paper 2. So 2 papers, 2 hours each for construction on site. And then we've got an employer set project, which covers across 17 hours of work in that project. The weighting for the exams is 35% for each one of the exams, 90 marks each. And externally marked is probably the key. So they're marked by us, City and Guilds. They will be externally marked, and the employer set project likewise. The component will then be graded with regards to the core, A star to E. Building services, similar model of assessment, but as you can just see there, exam paper 1 and 2, the exam is slightly longer, 2.5 hours. We've got slightly more marks, 110 marks rather than 90 in the construction, but the weighting of the overall grade is the actual same. It's 35% each, and again, it's externally marked by City and Guilds. Employer set project, again, although it's the same hours, it's a different project from construction to on-site. It obviously relate more to the construction element and more to a building services topic with regards to the employer set project. But again, the building services graded A star to E. So that's for the core. We'll now look at the actual assessment for the on-site occupational specialisms. So we've got to choose one of these specialisms, as Jason mentioned on a previous slide. You can register on the specialism after the core. You have to choose one, and they are all assessed by an externally assignment, a synoptic assignment. So those who are delivering technicals at the moment, very similar model to assessment, as you can see. So none of the core specialism, none of the on-site specialism assessment is in an exam. Everything is in that one synoptic assignment at the end of the academic year with regards to the delivery of the specialism. As you can see, the duration of those 24, 27 hours, 26 hours for the plastering there, but they're all allocated 90 marks and obviously weighted 100%. So they will be allocated marks by the in-centre assessor, marker as the new term is really, and moderated by City and Guilds. So for those who are delivering 8202 or equivalent but construction technicals at the moment, it's a very similar model of assessment. So we'll look at the next slide and building services. So for the standalone specialisms, you would choose one of these, and everything again would be included in that synoptic assignment, the externally set assignment. So it's set by City and Guilds, marked in centre by a marker, and then that is uploaded, or a sample of those are uploaded and moderated by City and Guilds. So again, you would choose one of those standalone specialisms, ranging in hours there, from sort of 16, 15 hours right up to 24. Depends on the content of the assignment, what the assignment's got to cover. But the specialisms there, and this is similar for the construction on-site ones, they'll be graded then pass, merit, and distinction. So the next slide shows us the paired specialisms for building services. So where you choose a paired specialism, the way we have to structure the assessment for that, we have to actually create an assignment for each. So these were structured as separate initially. You'd got to choose two separate occupational specialisms in building services. But when we looked at this and when we went through validation, etc., with regards to developing the qualification, it was evident, you couldn't potentially choose maybe electronic engineering and plumbing and expect to deliver it, or refrigeration and heating engineering and expect to deliver it and assess it appropriately. So that's where this paired specialisms come from, but we still have to have two synoptic assignments. So basically a synoptic assignment for each specialism. So it's just something to be mindful of. Obviously, there is more than guided learning hours allocated to those paired specialisms, and there is more assessment time, which is something you will have to build in for delivery. We are going to be doing some curriculum planning events in the near future in January. So if you signed up for those alerts Jason mentioned at the beginning, you'll be getting an invite to those, and that's where we start going into that, how to build up your delivery, your curriculum plan, and maybe look forward to delivering the actual T-level qualification in its entirety the following year. So that's just an example of the specialisms. They're all very similar. They've all got similar models of assessment. We'll look at some of the resources with regards to HODA education. So HODA are developing a core book for on-site and building services. So there's a link there to the HODA T-level webpage. There's actually a sample unit on there as was at the moment. And we're hoping that, well, we've been told the books are going to be developed and available in spring. So they should be available well in advance of your delivery if it's going to be from September next year. So as well as the actual books for the core, they've also mapped any current books we've got. So from some of the trade occupations, they've mapped them to the current books and map the criteria back to the T-level. So where you've got a current book, it's still going to be useful and available for T-level with regards to delivering your occupational specialisms. So that's HOD's resources. We'll have a look at some of our resources on the next slide. So a lot of support and guidance on the website. There's a little screen grab there on the left. T-levels has got its own tab at the top there. And if you hover over the resources tab, there's some of the detail on the right there you'll have available to you. There's a dedicated web page with some of the delivery resources. So what we generally call smart screen material is freely available for the core. That's been produced. That's all available on the actual website at the minute. So if you're starting to think about maybe introducing staff to T-levels and getting them used to the content, etc., as well as the qualification handbook, you've got all the resources you need for the core with regards to your delivery requirements, what you generally see on smart screen or your handouts, PowerPoints, etc. There's a lot of other resources though, regards to timelines for delivery, curriculum planners, planning and delivery resources. There's information on employer industry boards, and a lot of general information which is not just around delivery. So maybe if you're in a management role, there's a lot of useful information on there which potentially could be used to help support planning moving forward. So that's all on the actual T-level dedicated page. And if we move on to the next slide, what we're going to basically do now is give you a couple of minutes while we see if we've got any questions come in. And we're going to put a link to this survey in the chat. So obviously we've rolled out a few support elements last year with regards to curriculum planning and loads of other activities we did remotely. Now things are opening back up face to face, etc. We want to ask the question, what do you need as an organization or as an individual to help support you moving forward to be able to deliver T-level effectively? And there's a little 2 or 3 minute survey on there. If you don't mind clicking on that in the chat now, we'll give you a couple of minutes to complete that, and then we'll drop back in and see if anybody's got any questions in the tab there. But it's just a way of you expressing what you need with regards to delivery for the academic year 2022. So we'll give it pause for a few minutes while people complete that. Thanks a lot. whilst people are just completing the survey, if there is any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. We appreciate it is a bit of an introduction today, and most people are just wanting maybe an overview of T-levels, etc. And we may have covered most things, but if there is anything, feel free to drop into the chat. As well as that, we are soon to be running on the 7th of December a workshop with providers to discuss how we work the window for the synoptic assignment. So, you know, the period that synoptic assignment window is going to be open, when would that start, finish, etc., and how that could potentially impact providers. So we've got to basically look at how we're going to work the window for the synoptic while still getting you the results you need for when you need them with regards to you getting all your figures in, etc., and funding requirements. If anybody would like to be involved in that chat, that workshop, and have the opportunity to contribute and have your say, please drop your email into the questions tab or the chat tab, and we'll forward that to the relevant person who can then forward an invite. It's 3 till 4, I believe, from memory, on the 7th of December.
Can't see any questions coming in through the questions tab, Rob. So it's 3:15 now. I think to give people a bit of time back. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to complete the survey and give us your feedback and let us know how we can help us to help you, essentially. So just thank everyone for the attendance today. Thanks Sam from DFE for supporting with this webinar. Please do get in touch if you do need any further support moving forward, guys. We will certainly try our best. Oh, sorry, we have got one question just come in. All right, no, it wasn't. Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. As Rob said, if you do want to attend the session we've got next week, please do put your email in the chat, and we'll get an invite sent out to you regarding the assessment windows on the OS. Other than that, just thank colleagues for the support today, Rob for presenting, and Mike who is working behind the scenes, putting the links in the chat and stuff. And as always, thank colleagues from DFE for supporting this event as well and giving an update on industrial placements. I hope you all stay safe, guys. Wish you all the best for the rest of this academic year. Hopefully you have a nice Christmas as well moving forward, and here's to a better 2022. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.